recording. And what I'd like you to do, let me share this. Well, let me get this over there and share the screen. And let me get it so I'm not covering the screen that I'm trying to share. And there we go. And here. Okay, so I put together a few slides, but basically I want to show you how you might be able to use this in the classroom. And to do that, what I'd like you to do is actually go to join iClicker Cloud as a student. And I should have put this in the chat. Let me see if I can, no, I gotta stop it. Let me grab that and drop it in the chat. And hi, Lisa. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is to try going right to this site when I get the chat window back. Or even just go to iClicker.com first. And it turns out I was a little wrong. I did send an email yesterday. Did that work for anybody?
I got it. I'm in.
Yeah, I logged on this morning, although it told
Okay.
me I already had one absence.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So it's working. Okay.
Same with me, Lisa.
And Gerard, did it work for you?
I'm just going there now.
If you may have to, what I'd suggest doing, and I should have done this before, I forgot, I hadn't looked at this for a while and I was setting it up differently and I realized, oh wait, I have to set up some other things last night. I forgot to check this. What's probably easiest is if you don't have an account to create an instructor account first, because if you just try creating a student account, it's going to ask you for an ID, which isn't necessary if you do it as a faculty member first, because when you have a faculty account, it also works as a student account, letting you test it. And I remember when we first switched to this, that's what I had done, because that way you can actually try it on both sides. So I'd had my phone being the student and I had my computer being the instructor account, and I got to test all of the tools just to make sure they worked as I expected to. But basically, as the instructor, you just need to put in your Oswego email and your name. And I think that's it. Or it may ask you for your institution.
Yeah,
Or it might even come up as soon as we go automatically because of the email address.
Yeah.
That's changed a little bit over time.
Yeah, it had you had to put SUNY College at Oswego.
You had to select SUNY College
Yeah.
at Oswego. And once you do that, then you could click on this, or you could search, log in as a student and search as a search for the class. And this is what your students would do. It's actually easier for students than it is for faculty, because all students have to do is create an account on their phone or on the web. And it just asks them, they do have to put in their student ID because that's how it links into the gradebook. And we are recording this though, Lisa, so if you miss anything, it will be there. Oh, and she's already gone. Okay, Lisa has to jump to another meeting. So what happens is, once you join, you'll be in the class. I already started an application and I'm going to move over the tool that you'd actually use. That this is what it looks like when you start it. It just creates this little icon that you can put anywhere on the screen where it's not going to overlap any other content. And as the instructor, you just leave that up there. If it gets in the way, just move it somewhere else. It just goes on top of everything else without interfering. And then when you're ready to do a poll, you just click on it to expand it and you get the whole set of tools. And we'll go through that in just a minute. But were you able to get in?
No,
Okay. Was the account created?
it's telling me I've got an account created. So I send a password reset link. I click on the link in the email, put in a new password, and then I get an error saying the password reset link has expired. Even though I clicked on it 30 seconds ago, and it says it's good for 3 hours. I've done this twice since you've been talking.
That's odd.
That's
Oh God, nothing wants to work for me today.
Well, so that sounds like you may have created an account before.
Yeah, I
So-
probably did way back when you had a session about this, like last semester. So I probably did and then never used it.
Well, if you remember what password you might have used then, that would work.
Yep. Oh,
But-
Linda's in. Linda's in.
Linda's in.
Yeah.
The message, once you are connected, is you've checked in. And then once you do that, you'll be there. And that's how students would join. That if they're using a mobile device, it's right on their iPhone or their Android phone. They have to log in, but once they've logged in, it will generally save that password and they can connect really quickly. And then once the instructor activates the class by starting the poll, actually, I probably should show you what it looks like from the very beginning from the instructor side. I'm going to end that. So now you're going to have an extra absence for everyone who hasn't submitted anything. But what happens basically is in the application folder in my computer and on the desktop on every Podium computer on campus, there is an iClicker link. And what happens is it looks something like this when you, it looks something like this when you first connect. And so I'm already logged in. If I was doing this in the classroom, it loads a new instance of it, downloads it, and installs it in about 10 or 20 seconds. And then you have to log in. But because it's on this computer here, it's already set up and I am logged in. So if you're using your own computer, it's just there. If it's a desktop one, you have to type in your email address and password to get logged in. And then all of your classes would be listed here. This is the only one I have this workshop. I set it up last night. And that was the code. If I click that join code, it gives me the code to send out to people. And it's just this. So you could use a code to share it with students. But if these are students at Oswego, you don't even need to do that, because what happens is they're automatically in the system through Brightspace. Once you connect the course to Brightspace, all your students would be enrolled in it and the grade book is connected and it just works seamlessly from our side.
So like, I'm just kind of playing around with it. So it's this add course. If I was to add.
So yeah, so you need to create a course for each of the courses you're working
before
with.
you do-
And then at the last stage of that, you connect
You
it
add.
to Brightspace. And it gives you instruction. on it.
Okay.
We're gonna have a
Gotcha.
workshop on that, I think, on Friday on how to
Okay.
do it.
Cool.
Maybe tomorrow, I don't know,
Okay.
sometime in a couple of
Gotcha.
days. But I mostly want to show people what this can do, because when you see that, you're more likely to think about using it. I did accidentally stop that process because I didn't actually start the class. And let me put that back up this time. And there we go. So I now have this. And what you would do is once you have this, you log in, it will show you all your course. Within a day or two, I will have a couple of classes out there because I'll be using it in 2 classes this semester. Right now, this is the only one I have active because you put in beginning and ending date. So your old classes disappear. They're still there. They're archived. All the information is there. But you just click start class and then students can join. So if you're logged into your device, students will then see that the class is now active. You can join it, you join the class, and then you get that message that you're checked in. Stay on this as you move through and so forth. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And were you able to get in? No?
Who, me? No.
Yeah.
Nope. I
Okay.
give up.
Well, we can still go. And yes.
Yeah,
and-
I'm just gonna watch you.
Okay, and Linda just noted, she got a message that says instructor started class. And if you're going to use iClicker, what I encourage you to do is to start it right before the class starts so that students won't have to try connecting while the class. And if they have any problems, you can assist them. And usually they only have problems the first time or two because from the student side, they'll have to join the class where it'll ask them what institution they're in. I'm not even sure if it does that anymore because their email address, but it will give them a list of all the courses. You used to be able to search for either instructor or for the course name, but now I think it's even simpler than that. I think it automatically pops up unless they add the class after you begin it, or after you do the connection. But students can add and drop, and that's all automatically handled in the background. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to go through some examples. And what we're going to do is ask you, what are some, this was the slides I put together last fall, and I obviously didn't update everything.
Oh,
But what I'm going to do is open a poll, except this is going to be a free response answer. So it's going to be a short answer, and I'm going to start the polling. And it's going to, it asks, because I've got two screens here, it's asking me which display. So I'm going to choose the one that has a question on it. And it just it captured whatever is on the screen. So that's how you'd use it. If you have a question, you generally, if you're using PowerPoint, you'd embed it there. If you're not using PowerPoint, you could open up a Word document, a Google Doc, and just type whatever question you want students to respond to right at the screen. And when you start the polling, it grabs an image of the screen so you can see what the question was. And so students can go back and see what the questions were that they were responding to, and they get to see the response and how it was graded and so forth. If you grade it, you don't have to grade it. Questions could be anonymous, they could be open-ended. And so far, no one has responded. And so if you do type in a response, we'll see there's one response now. And we'll wait until we get up to two. And we have two responses. So I can stop the polling. Now this, I set it by default, it will do a count up. If I'm doing multiple choice and numeric questions, I'll let students work through the problem first. And then I'll use a countdown, because it's easier for students to see, well, I have a minute and a half to think about this more, to process it, to get connected if they weren't connected initially. You know, a minute and a half or a minute and a quarter normally works well, as long as you gave, if it's a more complex thing or something you want to think about more, or even for free responses, you might want to make it longer, but you can set a default time for the countdown, or you could just leave it as a count up and watch the responses. And once everyone responds, or you get really close to it, you can say, okay, get your response in the next 20 seconds or something, and we're going to shut it down. But I find it easier to let the computer do the countdown rather than me being the bad guy and cutting them off if they didn't get to finish a response. You know, and it will turn red when it gets down to the last 10 seconds, the numbers get bigger, and it warns them essentially that they need to respond. And so what happens then is, if you were doing the type of polling that Eric Mazur does, is he generally, and this is one that's often recommended, he normally will ask people a question. He'll look at the responses, and then if most people got the answer correct, or if most people got it wrong, he might just display it. But if there's somewhere between 30 and 70% of, or 30 and 60% or so who got it right, or 40 to 60%, maybe a better range, so that roughly half the class gets it right, he'll then go to a second stage. But what he'll do is he'll drag this over to the other screen if you have two screens, or you can do it on your mobile device and look at the results yourself. But because I don't want to jump back and forth from sharing one screen or the other, I'm going to go directly to see the responses. And what happens there is, while you're in the poll, you can look at the results from the last question by just clicking on that result thing. If it's a second screen, you could see it yourself without the student seeing it. If you're using just the one screen, you'd have to do it yourself. So keeping English 102 students engaged is one. The other response was managing time. If we had a lot of responses, one of the things you could do if you have a larger class is do a word cloud. So you could see, you know, and you could let students do multiple responses if you choose, and you can get a word cloud to see what some of the common themes or threads were in the responses. And well, we can do it here. We're not going to find a lot of common words, but we can see they were all equally likely. Cool. But with a larger group, you can see that. And then, you know, if this was something you were grading, you'd have the ability to click on it and give more points for a correct answer. You can set it up however you want. You could just give everyone points for responding, or you could have, in some cases, you have correct answers and incorrect ones. What people generally do to keep this low stakes is they give some points for any response, but more points for a correct response. What I do, for example, is because the questions I ask in my intro classes tend to be moderately challenging, and usually about half of them will get it right. I generally give 3 points for any response and 5 points for a correct response. So even if a student answers every question wrong, they get a 60, but generally they're going to do better than that. If half the time they get it correct, half they don't, the average score would be about an 80. And I drop a lot of scores. I drop at least five each semester when I'm teaching Tuesday, Thursday. So they got 2.5 weeks of scores they can drop without any penalty if they don't do as well. But well, it's kind of fun. And we can close the results now. And let's go to another question just to see some of the other options. So here's some questions. So why might you use polling? What are some ways you could use polling? So I'm going to do, again, another short answer, and we'll probably get 2 responses, I suspect. if you're only using one screen, you don't get that image there very much. Yeah, so yeah, you can put it right in the response, which you probably want to keep the question so that they can give a fairly quick response, because if they're typing on their phones, it's a little bit harder. On a laptop, it's easier to do it for the poll. You can copy and paste it though, if you're doing it on the same device, because we did get a response in chat, but by copying, if you have it there, you could copy it, paste it right into the response and submit it. If you're using a smartphone, then you've got to type it. We've got one response. And if you want, and what I often will do if I'm using two screens, or if I have my phone logged in, I will watch the responses as they're coming in to see what the responses look like. And we now have two responses, so I'll stop the polling and we can take a look at those. So during interactive class sections, during lectures or group activities, to have the class evaluate everyone's thesis or research questions. Those are both really good ways of doing it. It's also can be used as a knowledge check, which is the interactive aspect of it, just to see whether students are getting the concept. You know, you could see if students' perceptions of something, or what you might expect them to, or what their attitudes are about something, and you can get some feedback too. See how it's working. It breaks things up. If you are going to be lecturing, it's a great way to do interactive lectures, where you provide a short lecture and then you ask students, are you getting this? By giving them a problem to try to apply it to see if they understand the basic concepts. Or you could try to stretch them to see how this might apply in a different context, to get them to work on transferability, for example. And you could do a survey of attitude or any number of other things with it.
Or even like I like to do like midterm course kind of evals, or
and you
get
can
feedback.
do it for course evals, and then you can make them all anonymous. Now it will tell you who responded, but it won't tell you which response is which. And to do that, you would click over here on more, and you would just turn it to anonymous. And we could have a timer count up or down. And also now there's a metacognition measure where you can ask students to rate their confidence. So you can see not only what answers they're picking, if they're, if there is a correct answer, you can have them rate how confident they are, and it gives them some feedback, where if they keep saying, I'm really confident of this, and they keep getting it wrong, it says, well, maybe you don't understand it that well. And one of the nice things about this is that if students are struggling with something, it's really likely lots of other students are. And when they get to see that other students are struggling with the same concepts, it eases the pressure a little bit. It lets them know that they're not the only one who struggles. On the other hand, if someone's not doing work that you're hoping they do outside of the class, and they're really confident, but they're getting a lot of things wrong while the rest of the class is getting it right, that's also a sign that maybe they need to adjust their understanding of how well they have processed material, how well they do understand it. So turning that on can give you a little bit, or give students a little feedback about whether they're correct to be confident, or if they keep getting things right and they rate their confidence as low, then maybe they want to be a little more confident in their understanding. I haven't done much with that, but that only became active actually last fall, but I might try it this spring. It has some nice potential. And well, here are some potential ways. Now here you could select all that applies. So this becomes a multiple answer, or multiple select question. So I'll open that and we'll see what people think. Just choose any answers that you think might be appropriate. And some of that we've already talked about. And there should be ignore any grammatical errors or missing apostrophes. They're invisible. They really belong there. Students' attention. Okay, we've got a couple of responses, so we will stop the poll. And if I wanted to, I could see the results as they came in by doing this, but then stop the poll. And we've got two responses on each of these, and I agree that that's pretty reasonable. We've already talked about metacognition. you know, one of the things I like about it, and I mentioned this to Linda before in the previous session, is that, you know, even if you have a small class, and I saw a workshop on this where someone was talking about using it in a class of 12 to 15 students. And what they noted was when I ask a question, even if I randomly select a student or I go around asking different students, I'm only hearing from one student at a time. And this way you get to see where all your students are at the same time. So you don't have to wait and ask everyone. You get to see how all students understand, how much students are understanding, and also share that understanding with students immediately. So you're getting the feedback and students are. And it brings students' attention right back to focus, because especially if they're being graded on something, their participation or the responses, it gets their attention and it brings it back. Now it'll get, if you're letting students discuss these before they vote or on the second attempt, letting them discuss it, it can get really noisy in the class. But once you shut it down, all of a sudden it gets quiet because they want to know what the right answer was. This was something that Eric Mazur demonstrated. He gave a workshop here at Oswego about 8 or 9 years ago, or 7 or 8 years ago now. And what he did basically is he had clickers, a particular brand that he spread out through about 150 or 180 faculty members who were here. And he gave them a brief explanation of why things expand when they're heated in terms of the physical properties of this. And what he said is, suppose you have a metal plate with a hole cut in it, and you put it in the oven and you heat it up to 400 degrees. What will happen to the size of the hole? And people started talking. He said, no, do it yourself first, vote on this, and then we'll give you a chance to discuss it. And people voted on it, and he didn't reveal the results. And then he said, okay, now talk it over with the people around you. And it got really loud and it seemed a little chaotic. And he mentioned, now look at all the noise that's happening here, but you're all actively engaged with this. And then he said, okay, the polling's over. Now, if I was to ask you, if I was to lecture to you on what would happen to the size of a hole in a metal plate when you heat it up a couple hundred or a few hundred degrees, it would be about the most boring lecture you could imagine. But here you were actively engaged with each other, debating this, processing it, thinking about the other people's arguments. And now, and this is why clickers work, because now everyone wants to know. And then he moved on to the next topic and people got really agitated because they needed to know what the answer was. And that was his point. He was doing the demonstration that when you ask students questions and they've taken a stand, happening. Turned off. Can you still hear us?
Yes.
Okay. Let me see if I can change that back. I don't know why that happened. The video turned off too.
Oh, is this part of the Google?
Oh, it shouldn't be. So now the video should be back. And let me see if I can get the microphone. Okay, the microphone's back.
Your video's not though.
There it is. Okay.
There it is.
I have no idea why that happened. But in any case, what happened basically is people were angry because they wanted to know the answer. And he said, that's exactly why you should consider doing this, because people take a stand, they commit to an answer, and they want to know what it is. It provokes curiosity because they've already been arguing this and they need to know whether they were right or wrong. And that's why he suggests we should think about it. Okay, I repeated that in case we lost the audio the first time. You can also, check on students' preconception, prior knowledge. You could ask them to make predictions about what they're going to study next, or what they think might be important, or what would be the next topic they're going to discuss. And that prediction is something that also has been shown to be effective in increasing learning. And just checking in with students, doing that midterm check, or even doing it more regularly can be useful. Now, here's, well, we already talked about, no, we did. We talked about it in the last session. So one of you will have a bit of an answer, but this is a multiple choice. I'm just showing you all the different types of questions here. So Eric Mazur and Carl Wyman in chemistry, a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, have done some fairly large scale tests on using clickers, where they had some classes use clickers, others that didn't, or some sections use clickers while others didn't. And they used standardized tests to see how much students learned. They tested the students before they went over the material, before the module was assigned. They tested at the end. And the question here is, what would be the difference in the learning gains? Because between the classes that use clickers and the classes that relied on traditional lectures and so forth. And we'll start the polling. You can make a guess.
I'm like,
Do people learn nothing more when clickers are used? Do they learn 20 to 50% more, or do the scores improve? Do they increase by 75 to 150%? Do they double or triple, or do they increase by more, or by 4 or 5 times in terms of the learning gains from the pre-test to the post-test? And I have no idea why we dropped the video and the audio.
I may have over.
Okay, so we've got 2 responses, and let's take a look.
Maybe it's.
And
Oh,
okay, so we've got one
I
for
was gonna-
20 to 50%, one for 75 to 150%. It turns out that they're both underestimates. Eric Mazur
Oh.
found the learning gains were 3 times as large
Oh,
in his
wow.
physics class when clickers were used. And Carl Wyman, in a larger scale study with many more sections, found that the learning gains were twice as high in chemistry classes.
Oh,
So, you know, the results are remarkable. They don't show up as being quite as large in all disciplines, but in virtually all disciplines, there's some learning gains when clickers are used. Could be just partly because of the peer instruction and just-in-time teaching. But I should note that in both cases, they were not just using clickers, they were using peer instruction where students were explaining things to each other and arguing about things. And they were also doing some just-in-time teaching where they were using the results from the clicker polls to decide what to focus on. Because if students were doing really well with something, they didn't have to waste class time on that. If students were struggling with something, they were able to devote more class time. And so they were able to use the class time more efficiently, which was one of the concerns that a lot of people have when they're first considering using clickers. Well, I'm going to take all this additional time to do this. And what people who use clickers generally find is it actually allows you to use your time more efficiently because you're not guessing what the students know. You're able to customize what you're focusing on based on what students are showing you that they understand and what they don't understand. So 400 to 500 would be a little bit high, but again, a lot of people were really amazed by the doubling or tripling of the learning gains from the use of clickers combined with peer instruction and so forth. Now, in those classes where people did not use just-in-time teaching and did not use the peer component of it, students liked the use of clickers and the instructors enjoyed it. Learning gains tended to either not be statistically significant or at least tended to be quite a bit smaller, because what seems to be most important is the peer instruction and the ability to focus on what students are struggling with and bringing them back to attention. But even if you only quiz students, you'd still get some of that effect, but the effect tends to be a lot smaller. Okay, now here we're going to do a numeric question. So suppose next week we open up and we have 100 students coming in with COVID or the flu or something else. If the number of new weekly cases rises by 10% per week, how many new cases would be expected 2 weeks later? So we're going to do this now as a numeric question. So now it's not going to be multiple choice or multiple select, but you actually have to enter a number. And here it's going to be an integer number of cases. And again, you don't worry too much about getting it right or wrong. This is actually a test about compounding. Got one response.
Oh, it's me next. I don't know, John.
I'll just
I am not giving a real number. I am just typing.
That's fine. You don't have to, and nothing's going to be kept. I'm going to delete all this after this. In fact, the whole course expires in a couple of days. I'm going to leave it open through Friday just to do the workshop on
Wait,
setting it
so
up.
this-
My brain freezes at the mere mention of the word
think-
math.
And
So
Okay, I'm just gonna do.
okay.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, so we got 2 responses and
I'll give a verbal 121.
okay, exactly. It's 121 because the first week it would grow by 10%, which would go to 110.
Yeah.
The second week it would grow 10% more, but 10% of 110 would be an additional 11.
Yeah.
So it's that compound interest or growth type of thing.
Understood.
So the correct answer is 121. And what would happen is, that's really rapid growth of COVID, which, you know, close to where we were a couple
have
of.
morbid expectations.
But if you want to grade it and give feedback, you could talk about it. And what you would do is, I haven't set it up to give additional points, but you would just click on the answers that are correct, and it would automatically give students whatever score is associated with correct, while the other scores would be whatever was. And again, that's not actually correct there, but that way you can give them immediate feedback and then talk through it, or, you know, talk through it. One of the things I'll often do is ask students who picked one of the answers to explain how they got there, and then ask another student, you know, who had a different answer to explain it. And then we'll talk it through a little bit. And then sometimes we go back and vote again if they still need a little bit more, or we'll just go, or I'll just explain what the correct answer is and so forth. And here, this was actually a question I did use in class, although I don't use this response very much. And don't worry where you go, but what we're going to do is we're going to use what's referred to as a target question. It's sometimes referred to as a heat map. And here, this was something I do in my introductory micro class, which is one of the reasons why students complain about struggling working with graphs. It shows you what happens if a tax is imposed and how this affects consumers and producers. Don't worry about where the correct answer is, but what you do is you just click on an area on the screen, either with the mouse and cursor, with the cursor and the mouse, or if you're using a mobile device, just press on the screen wherever you think the answer might happen to be. And it will record wherever you touch. And you can, with any of these things, students can change their answer until the polling closes. And that's true with multiple choice, numeric responses, and so forth. So you can still change your mind until the polling is stopped. And what will happen now is when we look at the results, it will show where people picked. And in fact, this answer does turn out to be correct. And what you would do to grade it is you would use your cursor to highlight. Well, it actually ends at
I
the
was
end of the red.
trying to get to the red.
Okay, so we'll give both credit there. There we go. So you just define a rectangle that encompasses the correct answer, and you may get some that are kind of marginal. And if you're not sure and you can trust the instructor to do that, you can stretch it a little bit that way. And what will happen is those answers will automatically be graded as correct once you click save. And there we go. So there was 100% correct on that one. And okay, so one thing I should know, just for the sake of completeness, is we used to use iClicker, which had these mechanical clickers that looked something like, I guess I have it on the next page. They were physical clickers. Students had to get batteries and keep the batteries in. They normally would last for about a year though, so the batteries were pretty good. Students have to buy them. With iClicker Cloud, it's free. The only restriction is students have to bring a mobile device to class. And I've been allowing students to bring mobile devices to class for a long time. And it's been many years since I've had students not have a device. I let them know in advance that we will be using them. Some students will bring a laptop, some students will bring their phones, some will bring a tablet, some will bring a Chromebook, but pretty much all students have one of those devices. It's like 99.9% or so of our students have at least some mobile device. Nationwide, it's a little bit lower, but it's still over 98% for college students. And what I have actually is some cheap tablets I bought like 4 or 5 years ago that are Android tablets. I got them at Walmart for like $49 a piece. And I just bring a couple of those as loaners and just check them out to a student if they don't have. But again, it's been at least 4 or 5 years since I've had to do that.
Mm.
If you want to allow students to use a physical class clickers, you can, but then you can only use multiple choice questions, and students would have to pay for the clickers if they chose to do it. You can combine mobile devices and clickers, but a new clicker costs about $45 or so. Used ones cost like $20, $25. And since they can do this for free on a mobile device, it's a lot easier. The software is cloud-based, so you don't have to bring any software to the classroom. You just log in the classrooms. And it's before, when we were using the physical clickers and a receiver in the classroom, and we have one in here, a bunch of clickers. You can't see it there,
Yeah.
but we have some that I used to use for workshops back when we were using those. Instructors had to bring a USB drive to class and remember to take it with them at the end of the class. And sometimes people would forget, and then they have to go to the lost and found and find it. Or sometimes they'd forget to eject it from the drive and the file system would get corrupted. And then we'd have to go in and try to clean it up. It's so much easier with the mobile devices. Students find it easier. Most instructors find it easier, and it's free here. And while the college is paying for it, when students had to buy the clickers, they were paying anywhere, again, from $20 to $25 for a used one or up. Here, it's only costing the college $4 per student per semester, which is a relatively inexpensive way of providing this tool. We pay far more for student access to Brightspace and many other tools. So it's actually really a great tool, especially given the learning games associated with it. And it's integrated with a Brightspace gradebook. So once you set it up, you use it and you choose to sync your grades with the gradebook after you define which answers were right or wrong, if you're going to do that, or if you're just using if you're just doing participation in that as a source of points, you get either the participation points uploaded or you get the scores uploaded. Generally, you do it as a separate column for each day, but you also have a running total column if you choose to do that. Most people generally would like to do it, tend to do it on a daily basis, so students can see what days they were present, what days they were absent, and how they did each day. They can see that in the cloud, but it's kind of nice to see it in the Brightspace gradebook. And for me, it's kind of nice to see if someone has a 50%, it's nice to see if that's because they missed half of the classes or if it's because they got half of them wrong, because there's a big difference between those two outcomes. And, you know, the advice you'd give students would depend on whether it's because they're not there or they're struggling with it. So, you know, first case, you just say, you really need to be in class more often. In the second case, you can say, you may want to use these resources to help you prepare a little bit more so that you'll be able to do better on these in class. Or talk about, you know, scheduling time or working with tutors or coming in for office hours and other things. And these are what the physical clickers look like. And again, they use a radio frequency connection. They work really well, but I wouldn't recommend it anymore. And the other thing,
That's what I was gonna say. You don't have to use those, right? You can just
you just use the software or the application on. Again, you just need to log into the iClicker website and you can do it right from there. So you don't need the app, you don't need a mobile device, you can just do it on any device connected to the internet that has a web browser. And that's pretty much it. So, any questions?
Yeah, I think it's great. I always assumed they would have to buy the clicker and do all that. So
And that
now
used
that
to be
it's
the
like
case.
this, I think it's definitely something I'll be able to add
And
into my
I
class.
argued this for the first year of COVID that we really, well, I had been asking for this for a year and a half, but they didn't install the upgraded software, the integration to allow us to move to this. And then I got really annoyed when they didn't do it when we went to remote teaching, because we lost the use of this tool. The only thing we could use was the physical clickers, and the physical clickers only work within like a couple of 100 feet of the receiver. But with the remote app, students participating over Zoom can join in just as easily as students who are right in the room. Now, you have to decide if you're going to allow that. There's a couple of ways of avoiding it. One way of avoiding it is if you want to require students to be physically present, one thing you could do is you could set it up so it does not display the questions on their device, it only displays it on the screen, which would make it much harder for them to get correct answers, especially with numeric responses. Another way you can do it is geofencing, which sounds ideal, where you can narrow down the range to a certain proximity of the classroom. The problem with that is it's based on the proximity of your web connection. And if students are coming in on AT&T or on Verizon or Sprint or something else, they may show up at a data center that is in Syracuse, or it may be in Albany, or it may be in Minnesota, in which case they won't be allowed to connect. If they're all in the same network as the wireless receivers in the classroom, then it would probably work if they're on the campus network, but even then it's not very reliable. So I would not suggest relying on that. But again, you know, if students are answering the questions, I don't really care that much. If they're answering the question and engaging, I don't really care that much whether they're in person or whether they're in Zoom. Because if they're coming in on Zoom, what happens is I just put them into breakout rooms for the discussion. If they're in person, they just talk to the people around them. Okay, Linda.
Yes, I have the screen like that has all, it says today's class and it has all the questions on there. So, and there's little things, looks like bookmark icons in the corner. Is that something where students can bookmark the question, or?
I don't know. I haven't,
It's not letting me do that, but I don't know if it's because of,
it may be because I haven't stopped it. I'm going to close the poll now. And when I close the poll, you get some choices, by the way. You can do a raster thing. You could do another poll, or you could do, you can do a quiz, which is asynchronous. So you post it and students could respond at any time. So if you were doing a high flex course, you could do the equivalent questions remotely by setting up quizzes. But I'm just going to end. And what it does is, it asked me if I want to end the class with an exit poll. So you could ask students to respond to that. I think by default, it's just saying, what do you still find confusing, or what do you need assistance with? Or you could just end the class. And I did that the first few times. And then students were walking off. And at first I got about half of them responding, and then 20%, and then 5%, because you do it right as students are getting ready to go. And sometimes they responded later, but not typically. Fewer and fewer students do it. But if you did it only occasionally and you ask them to respond, it would be helpful. You do it like 10 or 12 times and students get kind of tired of responding. So I'm just going to end it and now see if you can do something with those. Is there something you can do with those bookmark type things, or?
yes, it is letting me, when I click it, it darkens it, which I'm not sure what that does, but it must do something.
It may be a way of letting you know that you want to go back and look at those, because once you do the poll, you can go into your online iClick or Cloud account and see which questions you were asked and what the results were, whether you got them right or wrong, and what the correct answer is, and so forth. The instructor can control that, how much students get to see. I generally let them see all of it after the fact.
Okay, cool.
So
Thank
So
you.
it's like, even though you didn't deploy the exit thing, I could still do it.
oh, you could?
Yeah, it said exit poll and I submitted a 5.
Okay.
It was like a rating.
So I guess you
And
can
the
still do
alarm.
it anyway.
Yeah. And the
Okay.
little,
So I don't know. I found it really helpful, and I've never stopped doing it. And I've tried to do it in more and more classes over time. And well, let me rephrase that. We were not supporting it during COVID, but I got my own account and I had students do it, get their iClicker accounts, and I did it anyway, even though it wasn't connected to the grade book, because you can upload the grades yourself. And I did that because I wanted to keep doing this, even though I had 380 some students who were all on Zoom in the fall of 2020. You know, we couldn't put that many people in the classroom to get that physical distancing we were doing at the time. So it was the only way I could teach a class that large and still do this type of thing. And it worked pretty well, except for the fact that I had to upload the scores every time and make sure students were logged in with the right email address, because now they have to log in with oswego.edu, but then they had all sorts of Gmail addresses they were using to create their accounts. And I had to somehow translate that back into the account names that were in the grade book. And it was a bit of a challenge just getting the scores up, but I was able to do it. It added maybe about 40 minutes a day of work, just because of the lack of integration, though, and the fact that students didn't always log in with their Oswego address.
I just noticed that everything that I bookmarked there, it shows up under a category that it's under study tools
Okay,
at the top banner, and then it has a list that says manage questions that has my bookmark things on it. It has a bookmark icon and it says manage questions, the number 6. And then if I click that, then
Actually-
it shows up all of those.
if you
Cool.
wanted to share the screen, we could all see that, because that would be nice to see.
Sure, I can do that. Hold on, let me
Because
see.
while I've tested individual questions to make sure they all worked, I never logged in as a student to the grade book.
Yeah.
So. Okay,
So this is where I went to, oops, did I get out? Uh-oh. What
some
I
of this
did.
might be new. Well, I think you can still do it if you click on that.
Okay, yeah, there it
Yeah.
is. There, then study tools.
Oh, I didn't have that.
Then
And
it
you
shows
have the manage-
flashcards or practice test. I'm not sure what that is, but it shows the
No, I-
manage questions.
Oh, see, I don't have that.
I wonder if this would let you select questions that could go into a flashcard version of this, or just as a reminder for you to study those things. Well, try selecting all, just see what happens, or selecting a few of them.
That's interesting because when I click on study tools, I don't get that
Oh,
option.
it says remove. I don't want to
Well,
remove.
so it would delete ones maybe, but just try, okay, just see what happens. I guess they're already selected. And try
Must
doing
be.
the flashcard thing. So if there's things you don't want to review, I suspect you could probably delete them. Try clicking on that X and let's see what happens. Try going to flashcards or practice tests.
Ah,
Okay. So it gives you a little flashcard where you get to try the things again to see. There you go.
Oh, cool.
So you could try it again and then check to see whether the answers were correct or not. Nice.
And see in mine, if I click study tools, it says I don't have any questions yet. Isn't
Did
that
you have an
interesting?
instructor account first? You did, and that may be why.
No, I
'Cause
had
see-
it, I made it here this
Okay.
morning, remember?
But didn't you start with the instructor account?
Yes.
If you start with the instructor account, you don't get to see this, which is why it didn't
Oh.
work for me when I never
Gotcha.
saw these before.
Gotcha, gotcha.
But that's really nice. It lets students go back and review all the things or use it to study for an exam or something similar.
Hmm.
Nice.
okay.
I didn't know about that feature, so I'm glad to see that.
Cool. Awesome.
And if they look at their class history, they can see their grades and how they did and so forth. But it'll also show up in Brightspace. But in Brightspace, they just get to see the grades. You know, here they get to see everything else. And you can set it up to do attendance if you want. You don't have to.
Oh,
But
yeah. Cool.
and the practice test, I imagine, would be like the flashcards, except maybe having you answer them all sequentially. Okay. So yes, you could try answering and it would give you the result. And
Answer pending.
then maybe if you click send, it would send it in. I don't
Yeah.
know. Okay. Okay, and then there we go. Now,
Oh,
if you type 121, it may rate it as correct, maybe. And try sending that. Huh.
Oh, because you.
Oh, because
put-
I didn't answer.
Yeah, because you.
The
made
correct
that
answer was the
correct answer.
165.
Right.
Because I remember I flagged that as correct. Okay, but if you had marked an answer as correct
Okay.
and students did it, they get to check to see where they're doing, which could be a nice way of doing some
Right.
space practice, retrieval practice,
Okay.
and
cool.
so forth. And they could study the questions they missed. Nice. That makes me even more positive about this. It's a learning tool for students where they
Yeah.
can go back and try things over.
Cool. I like this.
I really do. I find it really useful. And students generally respond really positive to it. And again, it doesn't cost the students anything. You can always try it. If it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't work, you can always stop.
Right. Yep. I can definitely see myself using this. Yes.
It's been fun. And many of the things we do in class doesn't feel as much fun. Certainly grading tends not to be,
Yeah.
but but it's a really nice tool for engagement. Again, it doesn't help for the students who don't show up for class. And we had a lot of those last semester, but it does encourage students to show up for class in ways that not using something like this doesn't. So it tends to get students there and it keeps them a bit more engaged. Okay, well, we'll stop this and we've got more workshops, lots of them coming up tomorrow. They're all 20 minutes and we've got 2 more days of workshops. So thank you. Good
Thank
seeing
you.
everyone.
Thank you for convincing me to come.
It's I've been trying to push this with everybody for a
That's a
long
good
time.
idea.
At one point, everyone except for one person in my department uses clickers or has used clickers. They may not use them in all their classes, but you know, they found it really helpful. So
Yeah,
it
I'm
often
gonna
spread.
share this with people in my department because I think it can help in certain situations. So even like in some of the cinema courses,
Oh, yeah.
or film studies, I could see that really helping with their
A good one.
in some of those classes.
Doing
So-
critiques, getting reactions. You could show a short video clip asking people to rate certain things or to evaluate it, or yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, and
Well,
I'll probably see you tomorrow.
I'll probably be here.
Yeah.
I'll stop the
Take
recording.
care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And